This is a CJSR podcast.
Volunteer-powered,
Listener-supported,
campus and community
radio.
podcast. Radio and podcasts.
They use industry sort of jargon, like they talk about mouthfeel and body and things like that. All of that enters into it. And
that's like wine.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. It does have those kinds of properties.
Hi, my name is Katelin Karbonik, and you're listening to That's Food from CJSR, revealing the backstory to Edmonton's food, one meal at a time. Today, I'm going to be talking about milk. Specifically, why our milk is the way it is, and why it may be different in other places. This podcast began 6 years ago in France with the best batch of pancakes I have ever made. The thing about living abroad is that the ingredients you buy are actually all just a little bit different from what you are used to. So, when you try to make your trusty Martha Stewart adapted pancake recipe with all the same ingredients but French, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a different result than you're used to. And usually not in a good way. But this time, these were the best dang pancakes I'd ever had. And the main ingredient that changed these pancakes was the milk. So, here I am, 6 years later, trying to figure out why I can't have those pancakes here in Edmonton. The first person I called up was Laura, my next-door neighbor in France. We ate these life-changing pancakes together, and I wanted to see if she remembered them too. Do you remember the pancakes I used to make?
Yeah, I do remember. We made it a few times, I think.
Yeah, do you remember, I remember when I went to France, there was, way more choices in milk than there is here. Here, when you buy milk, it's, the same. But I remember specifically, there used to be that, radiation-treated milk that didn't need to be refrigerated?
Yeah. We also have that in Austria.
Yeah, which is very weird for me because that doesn't really exist here. You can't. That's not a thing. And also, it tastes to me, it was is this even milk? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't really taste like milk.
Yeah,
it's more if you don't have to cool it, then
what is it? But you did have the pancakes that I made, which I sometimes made with the other end of the spectrum in terms of European milk, which was the raw milk that they had there, the unpasteurized. Do you remember that stuff?
I remember it, and I remember that we talked about it, and we said that it's not allowed in Canada or in the United States because you don't really have raw cheese and raw milk, right?
Yeah, super illegal. It's very illegal here. What I always thought was so crazy was that you would buy this milk and then every day it would sort of change in your fridge. It would be different. It would be different. And then it would go bad really quickly, within 3 days. Yeah. But it wouldn't be bad like milk gets here. It would be it would just get sort of thick. And then I would use that to make pancakes, and they are still to this day the best pancakes I've ever made in my entire life. I can't.
You have to go back to France. That's what you want to say, right? But I guess France is also an exception in Europe because in Austria the milk tastes the same as well. We have different brands, but you have high-fat milk, low-fat milk, long-lasting milk, but basically they're all the same.
I wonder why France is like that.
Yeah, they have something about food and stuff.
Next, I talked to Dan Wong, president of the Western Dairy Council, about what makes an ideal glass of milk here in Canada, and why that might be different in other areas of the world.
Dan Wong, and I'm the president of the Western Dairy Council, which is the trade association for dairy processors in Western Canada. So in the industry, dairy processors are basically the companies that transform the raw material, the raw milk, into finished dairy products.
Cool. So what does the perfect glass of milk taste like to you?
It would be clean and consistent. And, in the industry, they use industry sort of jargon, like they talk about mouthfeel and body and things like that. All of that enters into it. And
That's like wine.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. It does have those kinds of properties. Totally different, obviously. There's no sort of astringency in wine, in milk, I should say. But but you do look for things like, does it taste smooth? Does it taste consistent? Some people like a creamier texture. Some people like it a little bit lighter. At a certain point, there's a matter of preference, but you go looking for all those things when you taste milk. You look for certain quality indicators, but then there's also preference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so say if I was to put a glass of milk that had come directly out of a cow, like just straight, and then a glass of milk that has been gone through all the processing that the producers do, what would be the main differences?
Basically what happens is that, when the milk comes off the farm in its raw state, it's transported to a dairy processing plant, and it goes through a number of basic processes, but essential processes. The first thing that's important is the temperature of the milk. While it comes out of the cow, right, it's warm, but even on the farm, it's immediately put into what they call a bulk tank, where it's chilled to 4 degrees centigrade or less. And that's done in order to basically keep it as fresh as possible. Milk is a live product, and so it's a host for bacteria and microorganisms to grow. So you need to keep it chilled in order to contain that. Then it gets shipped in refrigerated tankers to the processing plant, where again it's always kept in a refrigerated state. It gets to the plant and basically undergoes 3 sort of critical processes. The first is pasteurization. It's basically a matter of heating the milk quickly and then cooling it quickly to basically kill the bacteria that result in milk spoilage. So you want to kill those bacteria, so to inhibit the spoilage of the milk. You separate the milk in order to separate the cream from the skim, and then you homogenize it, which is basically a process where you break down the fat globules into small pieces so that you get a, as the word implies, sort of a more homogeneous product.
Okay. So you said that the steps that dairy, when it comes off the farm, goes through is temperature. It needs to be cooled because of the bacteria in it to keep it fresh, and pasteurized to kill the bacteria that spoils the milk. And I know this is there's like a weird faction of, I don't know, society that is really into unpasteurized milk. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Like why people would be into unpasteurized milk, and maybe what the difference is? Like how does it taste different?
I think it depends on who you're speaking to. There are some people that are devotees of unpasteurized milk, and some of that has to do with sort of a history and culture. Where you came from. There are not not all parts of the world historically have pasteurized all their milk. In parts of Europe, they make certain varieties of cheese with unpasteurized milk. There are those who will tell you that the properties of the cheese and the flavor of the cheese made from unpasteurized milk is different, and some of them would argue that it's superior. But in Canada, it's the law to pasteurize the milk for purposes of public health and food safety. the milk is required to be pasteurized. And so, if you are a dairy processor in Canada, you're expected to pasteurize the milk.
Mm-hmm.
And, so if individuals sort of anecdotally say, well, I prefer the taste of unpasteurized milk, or I prefer the taste of the cheese that you make from unpasteurized milk, that may reflect their own personal experiences, their own personal histories.
Mm-hmm.
There are some who argue about the nutritional differences between unpasteurized and pasteurized milk. But again, I think that the differences are not that significant. Sort of they're different, but not necessarily better. And as a matter of fact, I think that from a public health standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
pasteurization is very important, and that's why it's the law in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Because so the bacteria that can grow in unpasteurized milk can be dangerous.
Well, it can be. Like I said before, milk is a live product, and so there are microorganisms in the milk, and there is biological activity in the milk. Some of it is good for you, some of it is not, and so you have to be very careful about the raw product. And the scientific evidence that Health Canada uses in order to make these policies basically says that you're better off with pasteurized milk from a health and safety standpoint.
What I think is really interesting about milk is that it is alive and there's a lot going on in it. And you mentioned in discussing things like raw milk or the homogenization process that other cultures and other people might value sort of the variation in the product before it gets processed. And what I'm wondering is whether you have thoughts on why that is.
Well, I think it's health and its consistency of the product. I think there's a sense that milk tastes a certain way. We expect it to taste a certain way. There's a word that you hear often with respect to dairy products as well as other products, and that's fresh. That's in the case of milk, what you're talking about is a product that is pretty close to its origin. It comes from the cow, and yes, if you process it into cheese or yogurt or something else, it has been transformed in that state. But the milk that you drink is basically pretty close to what comes out of the cow, with the exception of the fact that, as I said, that it is pasteurized. It undergoes a homogenization process and a separation process to give it a consistent feel, so that when you buy, whatever it is, 2% milk in the grocery store, you know what you're getting. And it's pretty consistent across brands, because that's what we as Canadians and as consumers have come to expect.
So that's it for today's episode. I hope you all get a chance at some point in your lives to go to France and make pancakes. Trust me, they're totally better than visiting the Eiffel Tower. Today's snack fact is that you can still buy non-homogenized milk in Edmonton. It's sold by Avalon Milk, and I wholeheartedly recommend scooping the cream off the top and eating it with your bare hands. Today's episode was produced by me, Katelin Karbonik. Original music by Doug Hoyer. You can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Our website is that'sfood.transistor.fm, and you can contact us at that'sfood@cjsr.com. We are That's Food CJSR on Facebook and Instagram. That's Food is produced with help from CJSR on Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton. But is it food? I guess that's food.